My name is Simon and this is How to Build a Racing Car. This is a quick race report from round 1 of the 2017 New South Wales Formula V State Motor Racing Championship at Sydney Motorsport Park. Since the club round 2 weeks ago I've been overseas for work, so I only had one day to prepare the car. It needed a fair bit of TLC, but with the time constraint I had to stick to just the critical jobs. I was able to replace the rear push rods with a more permanent solution and make a parts and supplies run. I also rebuilt the front steering rack adapter out of plate twice as thick as what I had before. It had been bent in the dirt at Wakefield. Things got off to a difficult start on Friday with practice. There was an issue found in the car's paperwork. It had been dated 2011 rather than 2016, and this had to be fixed before I could go out on track. I just made it out for a couple of laps in the first session thanks to this. I had a throttle cable snap on me, taking me out of another one of the sessions. I then had a spin in the next which dislodged the front bodywork and caused it to flap in the wind. I elected to pull in rather than have it pull itself to pieces coming down the straight. That plus cleaning the car out took me out of another session. All told, I only had one decent practice session in that day, giving me some experience in the wet and a very little amount in the dry. I've driven on this track many times before, but not in the last 2 years. This also was the first time this car has been there. Qualifying on Saturday went okay. It was very wet, but the car was manageable in the conditions. The times were spread out. I placed 5th, which was about 6 seconds off the pole lap time. I think there's more in the car, but frankly my driving will need to improve in the wet if I'm going to get there. Race 1 got off to a terrible start. It's difficult to find gears from neutral in my car, so I was concentrating on finding first coming up to my starting grid position. If I'd been thinking, I'd have selected second gear rather than first given the wet track. I ended up with way too much wheel spin in first and changed up almost immediately, which dropped me down a few positions almost straight away. I was soon given a place by a spinner halfway through the first lap, before losing a place again soon afterwards. I regained that position around the outside of turn 1 on our first tour round at speed. I quickly came under attack from John, who attempted to go down the inside. I was able to hold him off. But not for too long, as he ended up towing me down the straight. Followed by Michael. And then followed by Stephen, who I hadn't seen coming up around my outside. Not a great few corners for me. From here the running order stayed the same until end of the race, though the weather continued to deteriorate into a proper shower. In an open wheeler such as this, it really feels like someone's just aiming a garden hose right at your visor, especially when you're behind another driver. The camera doesn't really capture the difficult visibility, particularly in this race I was also dealing with my visor fogging up. It makes for pretty exciting driving. Anyway, I'm sure you can tell it wasn't the best race for me. I dropped from 5th to 7th out of 14 cars, 11 of which were the 1600s in my class. Race 2 on the Sunday started on a mostly dry track, and in what I guess was a slight improvement on my performance on Saturday, I managed to only lose one place off the line. I made up a place into turn 2, though the driver, Craig, was having some fairly severe issues with his steering. He ended up just nursing the car to the end of the race. An incident ahead gave me another place, but I wasn't really able to hold on to the front pack. Soon, Michael and myself in one of the Stingers began a battle in which he would catch and overtake me in the corners before I would catch and overtake him on the straight. The car just wasn't fantastic in the wet, but it was downright poor in the dry. Stephen Butcher, who manufactures the Stingers, kindly broke up the repetitive back and forth by blasting by and saying goodbye to the both of us. But Michael and I quickly got back to what we were doing. The camera died at this point, but basically ended up with me dropping back just a little bit too far to get by him by the finish line. We finished the race side by side with him just ahead. Race 3 and back to wet conditions. This time I finally made a getaway that I could be proud of. I fought Stephen around the outside of turn 2, getting the inside line for turn 3, which actually is not where you want to be as it's covered in rubber and incredibly slippery in the wet. To add to the water, a car was spraying oil on the track this race, which made things doubly difficult. It was getting on my visor, which hurt visibility, plus it made the track much more slippery than it would have been simply with the water. I dropped 4 wheels off the track, which earned me a bad sportsmanship flag. They're particularly strict on certain corners of this track with the track limits, as the runoff areas could otherwise be used to gain an advantage. I was passed by John and eventually Matt, who was carving his way back through the field after an earlier throttle issue. apart from that, this was a pretty uneventful race for me. I crossed the line in 6th, not a brilliant result for the round, but I was struggling this weekend with the car. I've got a long list of improvements that I'm planning between now and the next round at Wakefield in April. I'm hoping I can improve the handling to kind of get it where I want it to be. I'd be unsatisfied if the rest of the year played out like this round. Anyway, I think it's worth saying quickly just how great this category is to be a part of. Despite everyone being competitive with one another on the track, there is a real sense of camaraderie between everyone involved. Every test day or event I've been to, Formula V people have done what they can to help me with my car or my driving. At this round, for instance, I got a phone call from Stephen on Saturday evening to tell me that he remembered seeing something on my car that he thought needed fixing. Something that he didn't need to do, but he did, just to keep me running. I've been given seals, lent tools, had people come over and help on the car, give advice. It's just brilliant and worth highlighting, I think. And again, I'd like to thank JKF and Intercat for the support that they've given me so far. Anyway, that's it for the round. Hopefully I'll see you on the next one.